We're using the plugin pytest-docker, and the link is in our section here. When we're in PyTest Full-Stack, it is Docker. There's a Docker README, and what I'll do while I'm here, I will just put the link to that up here. What the docs say is basically we first of all must install pytest-docker. It uses the docker space compose command that's for now the new version. If you want to use old versions of docker-compose, you can. We don't need to get involved with any of this. We pip install pytest-docker. I've not done this at all. I've just done the pytest-docker. It gives an example of Docker Compose. 2 will fail, so make sure if you actually use while you're using this one here, it's 3.9. It's a little sort of web service that we're testing. We just use this standard code, and it's a function to check if it's the response status is 200. It builds in various fixtures, and all we do is we're testing that we get the right status code according to this example. By default, it looks for docker-compose in the very root of your tests. We're having it in a separate folder. So in our conftest.py, we basically give it a new location of where it's actually installed. So it's installed in tests, Docker. And if you're using a different file name, you can actually put the file name here. And I think we'll try that in the second attempt. I haven't tried that. We have our tests here. We're not going to go into the code, but basically just checking it works. I've got a little test that runs here and that it gets the right status code back. It says here status 418, but in the documentation here, is it responsive, i.e. is it up and running? Then we're looking for the 418 code, and the 418 code So 418 is basically just, it exists, but it's a response for requests they do not wish to handle. So let me put that in the notes. Returns 418. Right, so what do we need to do? Well, firstly, and I've done this so many times, is make sure your window, your Docker desktop's running. I haven't got any of the images from the example that it's using here in Docker Compose, so we can see that run. So we'll have that up. The first time round, we'll watch it actually load in the image. It'll take a while. The second time, we'll look at the containers. So what we need to do is to run the command is python-m pytest-vs tests and just Docker. I like my notation with the numbers, but it fails if I use something like a numerical start. So I've had to just call it Docker. So if we run that, that's up and running. And we'll suddenly see now that it's taking time at the bottom here. It's hanging. Well, it's actually downloading the image. There we see the image has come in. And if we look at containers, we should also see that pop up. And then it'll pull it down afterwards. There it goes. Done. And tests are passed. So that is the Docker Compose PyTest Docker plugin. There are a few others as well. We can see in our notes in our PyTest Cookbook. If we come into there to Docker, There's Docker Compose, Docker Tools, Docker Python Unit Test, PyTest. I may make videos on those later, but this seemed a nice, fairly straightforward way of testing against Docker.